Well, as Randy mentioned, my name is Agustin Donati. I'm a product marketing director with Avature. I'm going to take you through, together with Mike, with today's topic, which is bringing your strategic TA vision to life. So to get this started, I was in HR Tech Chicago this year and also in HR Tech World in Paris recently. And certainly one of the key words there and one of the buzzwords in most of keynote presentations was innovation. I think we're hearing this word more and more. And the reason for this is I think that if we think about this 50 years ago, innovation used to be more related or connected to very, very specific industries, primarily those related to technology or science. But today, innovation is in the minds of every executive of every company, regardless of the size of industry of those companies. And I think that mainly that is happening because we are in an unprecedented context of constant revolutions, right? We have, different things that are changing the world around us radically all the time. We have big changes happening in very, very short periods of time that affect life as we know it. We have technology causing social transformation. If we think of the evolution of phones and how they are changing the way we connect with each other and the way we work. We have entire industries that are needing to re-engineer themselves, like media, for example. And among all of these changes, we also see a workforce whose habits are extremely different than the previous generation. We're hearing things like gig economy. So the new generation does no longer want to commit to long working relationships. Now, all of this context of unprecedented change, it's forcing companies to innovate and redefine themselves. And I think the big question within this landscape is, are you a disruptor or are you going to be disrupted? I think that's the big question. And in this, HR plays a very, very important role because to be a disruptor, you need to have the right people in your organization. Innovation starts really with finding and retaining people that will allow you to then provide those cutting edge services or products to beat competition. So it's really about HR performing activities that will ultimately impact the outcome of the business. But I think that in order to enable this transformation, first of all, HR and HR technology need to be re-engineered as well, right? Just one example of this. So Avature introduced CRM to the recruitment market almost 10 years ago. But we really didn't know back then how critical this was going to be today. And we see today that leading companies have realized that finding the right people involves more than just screening candidates that apply through their career site, but they also need to proactively search and engage the best people out there. Those candidates that might not even be looking for a job. And to do this, these companies are not just leveraging new technology beyond those traditional legacy ATS systems, but also even creating specialized teams that didn't exist before as part of HR. For example, specialized teams that are dealing with things like recruitment marketing. So in order to continue with this, let's step back a little bit and think about the key elements for innovation, right? The first thing is the vision. So where you want to get to with this innovation. The second thing is strategy. So what's the road that you're going to take to get there? And the third thing is technology. Technology is going to be the means of transformation. It's what's going to take us to that vision. However, I think that technology in this whole scenario, in this landscape, can help you execute your HR strategy to innovate and win the fight, but you can also fall in the technology trap. So the technology trap would be to having to end up adapting your strategy according to the constraints of a system. So that's why I think that in order to bring your own vision to life, strategy and technology need to meet on these three key principles: agility, end-to-end service delivery, and engagement. So today, I think one of the things that we're going to see is we're going to see how Siemens, a 380,000 employees, right, Mike? Global company is changing, is transforming based on these three pillars and how they're using technology to enable this transformation. So with that, Mike, how are you?
I'm good. Augustine, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good. Good. Thank you to HCI and to Avature and Augustine for allowing Siemens to tell a bit of our story here today. So I'm going to go through a few slides to provide a bit of context for those of you that may not be familiar with Siemens. So the slide you're looking at now gives you a sense of the size and scale of our company. We are, as we like to say, probably the biggest and oldest company in the world. There are companies that are bigger but not as old, and there are companies that are older but not as big. We've been around nearly 175 years in some way, shape, or form. And as Augustine suggested, we're now somewhere in the vicinity of 380,000 employees, rough numbers, worldwide, several hundred countries. And you can see that we're headquartered in Munich, but literally have operations around the world with significant market share coming from all parts of Asia, the Americas, and also from Europe, Middle East, Africa, and a significant number of employees worldwide. And I think the best way to describe us is a sort of a traditional, diversified industrial conglomerate. So Augustine, if you can go to the next slide. So the simplest way to understand who Siemens is and what we do is that we've basically got nine divisions across a variety of different business segments. So we have a very robust energy portfolio, which would include our power and gas division, wind power, renewables, power generation services, and energy management. These are all around the generation, transmission, distribution, and management of energy across the full spectrum. So gas, electric, coal, oil, renewables, you name it, we're involved in some way, shape, or form. And we are a very significant player in that energy portfolio. We also are proud of our electrical engineering background. So we've got a lot of businesses that sort of take advantage of the modern version of that, which is automation. So we work with companies, particularly in the production side, to make factories more modern, mostly using controllers and some mechanical equipment, but mostly electronics and software. And you can see that in process industries and drives and the digital factory divisions. We also have a very robust mobility division. So we are a key player worldwide in high-speed trains. We also do a lot of light rail here in the United States and some other markets. And we also provide software and other technologies to enable cities and transportation providers to sort of manage their business. We also have a building technologies division, which does fire, safety, and security for buildings around the world. And then we've got a healthcare division, which has recently been rebranded as Healthineers, combining healthcare and engineers. And that's a company within a company, sort of managed, part of the parent of Siemens, but a separate business which does a variety of different things diagnostic and IT related in the healthcare space. And then, as you can imagine, most of what we do is large and complex. So we have our own financial services division internally to help customers, which can range from utilities to governments, to help them structure the deals necessary to finance the services that we provide. So again, very large, very complex, very diverse set of businesses worldwide. And just to give you some sense of where we think the world is going in our space, if you look down the left-hand side of the slide, these are the trends that we absolutely believe in, that digital is transforming the world, that globalization is here to stay and will accelerate and expand, that urbanization is a trend that won't change anytime soon, that more and more people will live in cities, and that creates concerns and issues and opportunities to make sure that those cities are safe and functioning properly. We believe that demographic change, just in terms of the aging of workforce, the aging of the populations of certain countries, the location of human capital, that the demographic trends are very profound and need to be paid attention to. And the last one is climate change, that we think calls for ongoing investment and research into different kinds of energy specifically. So we think that distills into three large trends: digitalization, automation of certain things, especially in business, and also the electrification of certain things. So we think that there's a lot of things that, if they're mechanical today, they'll be electric tomorrow. And if they're electric tomorrow, they'll be digital the day after. And we think this creates tremendous opportunity for us as a company to work in these areas and help our customers solve these issues and solve some of the problems that we think left unchecked will cause more problems, than we need in the world going forward. So the real key takeaway here is that we are very big and very complex, and that brings a set of opportunities with it and a set of challenges as well. So I'm going to turn it back to Augustine at this point and have him sort of pick up the next piece.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mike, for that. That was a great introduction. I think that really sets up the stage to understand how complex Siemens is, and also hence how important these three pillars that we're going to see now are to support that transformation. So let's start with that first pillar. Let's start with agility. So I'm going to talk about this from an HR tech perspective. I think that typically HR technology has been pretty much rigid, right? Legacy ATS systems, they have a pre-built way of recruiting based on what these vendors thought recruiting was. Now today, since we talk about this, ever-changing context in which you are and the need to find new opportunities and innovate, you need to define what works for you. So now the technology needs to be there always for what you need to do. And this is a fundamentally different approach than what we had, let's say, 10 years ago. It's technology now adapting to your needs and not the other way around. And when I say technology, I'm talking about workflows that you configure, the data models, portals that you may use to collaborate or engage with hiring managers or referrers, and even mobile apps. I think it's not just about customizing this technology, but also to specialize it according to different business units, regions, or departments, because one-size-fits-all approaches have historically had a hard time meeting reality. And being agile means that this customization can be done at your own pace, I think, because mainly when the world of ideas, that vision that we saw a couple of slides before, when the world of idea meets reality, things are usually, slightly or radically different than what we planned. So the tools that you use and the tools that allow you to be successful are the ones that give you that agility, the ones that allow you to put into action your ever-adjusting, ever-improving strategy. So I think that that's what agility means. Now, Mike, what role has agility played within the transformation of Siemens?
If you could, Augie, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So one of the things that I'm going to try to do today, hopefully, which will be helpful to the listeners, is, I think sometimes people tend to say, well, of course, Siemens is massive. They must have a lot of resources. They must have a lot of people that understand all this. So I'm going to try to, we are large, but that does not necessarily mean that we've got all this figured out. So we think we figured a few things out, and I'm going to share them with you. So regardless of what size your company is, hopefully you can take something away from the conversation today. So one of the things that we have tried to do is to stay as simple and as basic as we possibly can and define what are the truths that we believe and then build our strategies around them. So one of the things that we have done is realize that recruiting has changed pretty significantly in the past 10 to 15 years, or even more rapidly, depending on what point of the continuum you start. So it wasn't that long ago that people looked in newspapers for jobs and they sent in a paper resume, and it was perfectly acceptable to tell your boss that, I called the person and they weren't home. And there were no email and there was no voice message. So jobs took a very long time to fill. And then we had the advent of some technology. So all of a sudden, things like Monster, ResTrack, and ResumeX, online job applications, electronic data was allowed to come into the system. And then, you added in the next phase, which is not too long ago, where you had social networks like LinkedIn and others. You had digital interviewing platforms. You had some degree of mobile application, and you had this sort of dynamic professional data, which may in fact, have ultimately begun the death knell for the resume. We think we are today is that there are talent communities out there that we need to tap into and then recreate internally using Avature. We need the functionality of a CRM tool, not a static place to collect applications, which we may never look at again. And we needed to pipeline people in a way that allowed us to get back in touch with them and organize them in a way that perhaps you couldn't do with an ATS. And we wanted to capture all this information so that we could be smarter about the market than we may have been in corporate TA functions in the past. So what we're trying to do in some ways is to break down the competitive advantage that search firms may have had on corporate TA functions in the past. They had access to data, they had reporting capability, they sounded smarter about the marketplace than many corporate TA functions did. And while all of our work is not executive search, we wanted to feel like we were an executive search function internally, that we had the ability to compete for our customers' hiring manager internally. We wanted to be able to compete for their business so that they wouldn't feel compelled to go to somebody outside who they felt was better at doing this than we were. And our view was that we needed software as a service provider like Avature that could align with some of our global HR systems principles to sort of bring this to life rather than trying to link together disparate systems worldwide or build our own tool. And that's in fact where we are on this journey now. So if you go to the next slide, just, I think it's important to understand also that none of this takes place in a theoretical world. We all live in a very real world, and if you're working inside a corporation, structure matters. And in the old days, our prior organization was that we had country talent acquisition heads that reported into a country HR head, and then recruiters reported into that person. And there was loose governance provided by a small team of people globally in the TA governance space, and then the country HR heads ultimately sort of reported up to some global CHRO. And now what we've done, which is maybe not revolutionary for all of your companies, but for us it was a big step forward. We've made this declaration that recruiting is an expert function, and as such, we need a global TA head to run that. So we have a leader by the name of Gonzalo Ruiz, who's our global talent acquisition head. I play the role of a regional TA head and report into him for the Americas. I've got country TA heads in my region reporting into me. I do have a matrix relationship into my country HR heads. But what this has done is created an organizational structure that is focused on TA as an expert function. So some of the benefits of this are that in the old structure, if you were a large enough country and you happened to have TA knowledge in your leadership team, then you could build an effective TA function. If you were a large organization, you may actually be able to have funding to buy some tools and other things that might help you be better at recruiting. But none of that was scaled at the global level. And if you were potentially in a smaller country that didn't have enough volume, maybe didn't have the budget to afford, and maybe didn't even have the expertise to afford some of the investments required to professionalize the function, then you were lagging behind the rest of the world. And so we had a variety of different systems infrastructures, different delivery methods, no real connection as a global team, no real efficiencies gained by virtue of, being a community of talent acquisition professionals inside the company. And we feel like with the creation of this new global expert team, we can now work together and solve problems on behalf of the function worldwide, as opposed to, big countries taking care of themselves and the rest of the world sort of having to figure it out. And we really think that we're at a point where HR consultants in the countries are now freed from doing recruiting work. So we've got professional recruiters now doing the work worldwide, which was a big step forward for us. We're investing in tools and process. We're traveling the world as a team to try to help one another get better at this. And for us, it's all sort of underpinned by Avature. And we'll go into a little bit of detail on just how that's coming to life on the next couple of slides. But this is really to go from being country-based and a little bit parochial and reactive to being truly global and proactive as it relates to managing the TA function. And then on the next slide, this is why we have focused on this. We really felt strongly that there were, again, given the size and scale of our company, that we had hundreds of thousands of CVs and resumes and people that we met and notes and contact information that were coming in year after year after year. And it all went into, the black hole of the ATS. Some people were good at pulling information out of the ATS as new roles came in, but a lot of the information never even made it into the ATS. It sat on people's desks, spreadsheets, no way to share the information. So we've used this model to sort of describe what we felt was lost effort. This is our famous radar slide. So we felt like the only place that we really had the radar turned on was active job applications, any searches that we did in LinkedIn or other local databases, and then sort of country-specific employer referral programs. But in the bottom half of this circle, all of these other things that took place on a regular basis, alumni, people that came in second, that were strong silver medalists but didn't get hired, how do we manage internal candidates, executive referrals, globally mobile talent? How do we manage all that? And honestly, we weren't. It was just sort of being lost. It was redundant effort, and we had to start all over again, frequently country by country, rec by rec, and had lost all visibility to these candidates. And we're hoping that with Avature, and we'll talk a little bit as we go forward, that we're able to sort of pull some of this through. So Augustine, if you go to the next slide, I can use a specific example. So this was one specific area where we felt like we really needed to leverage a different way of doing things. Hopefully some of these pictures resonate with people, right? You go to a career fair, there's thousands of people there. You're not quite sure who you're meeting. You get a bunch of paper resumes. You take them back to the office. Maybe people get responded to, maybe they don't. So one of the functionalities that we're really happy about is that both for campus and for other recruiting activities, we now use iPads, and we've configured the event check-in portal with Avature, where we can actually go to an event, hand somebody an iPad, they check in, they're immediately entered into one of our talent communities. They're organized. Recruiters can go back and send an email to everybody that applied or came to that event that day, customized emails to that event. You can send individual or group emails. It helps us organize, and immediately people become part of our talent community. You can search additional openings and share additional information that they may have about themselves with us. And this would have taken forever in the old days because we would have had to scan the resumes in, and it's a ridiculous way to do business. But until very recently, this is in fact exactly what we were doing. So one quick story to bring this to life. We did a workshop in the Middle East at the end of August. I would strongly suggest that if you're going to run a workshop in the Middle East, you don't go at the end of August. It was quite hot. But we ran an event. We had a new recruiter that had just joined the company who was stationed up in Saudi Arabia. So this is the first meeting he's ever been to with the rest of the team. He's an accomplished recruiter in Saudi, and he says, I really think that this Avature check-in portal would be helpful to me in this event I'm doing in the next few weeks. So we quickly got an iPad configured, turned on the right permissions, got everything set. And about 2 weeks later, Majid went to this event for women only. It was a female career fair in Saudi, part of the Saudi's government's effort to get more women into the workforce. And so we had a nice career display booth there, and Majid showed up with the iPads, and we had about 1,000 women come to our booth and register in our talent community now in this area, and we're able now to stay in contact with them. This is not only an operational success for us, but also we feel very proud about being one of the companies that is trying to help the Saudi government with this initiative to get more women into the workforce. And as Majid said, if I hadn't come to this workshop and hadn't heard about Avature, and if the timing had been different, we may not have had anywhere near this number of people, and we may not have gotten all the resumes, and it would have felt like a completely different experience. And part of the reason this was a success for us is because we took this step of actually going to the countries, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that we were very proactive in terms of how we treat the rollout of Avature and what we think it means to the daily life of a recruiter. And you can't do that by email. Our belief is that you have to get out, that the world is changing rapidly. And for us, the center of the universe is the recruiter, and we have to talk to them in a way that's meaningful. And that's not always virtually. Sometimes that's actually in person. So we are traveling quite a bit. We're doing these workshops around the world. But you can see the benefit of this, that if you go to a country, talk to somebody, good things can happen pretty quickly. So that's a real example of where we used the check-in portal in a positive way.
Yeah, Mike, and I personally love that example because I think all the components that I mentioned earlier kind of meet, right? Because you identify the need of creating those talent pools and tapping into, maybe a set of candidates that were being underserved. And you have the agility to transform your organization and change the structure, but then you also needed the technology to come with you, right? And to leverage this kind of, for example, talent pools to go to career fairs in a very specific environment. So in this case, in Saudi Arabia. So this is, again, I think a good example of how these two things, the technology and the strategy need to meet to make it all work, right? Great. So with that, let's move on to our second pillar, which is end-to-end service delivery. And I'm going to start this section with a very, very obvious statement. Your strategy will be executed by people. And as obvious as this may sound, most of the time, the people that will actually be involved are forgotten. So that's why I think that a very good exercise, and really the main step and the first step, should be to draw a map of the process, identify the key stakeholders, and making sure that the strategy that you're building is going to be able to support them. So let's take a look at, for example, one of the examples of different experiences that we can create for different types of stakeholders. So what we're seeing here on the screen is three different stakeholders. We have hiring managers, we have referrers, and recruiters. So the same interface for the three type of stakeholders in the process would probably still work, right? Mainly because the same actions and the same information is not being used by these three stakeholders. And I think we as consumers of apps, we kind of go through the same experience. We don't use the same app for listening to music than the apps that we use for ordering food. Mainly because we need different information. We want to see different information. We want to filter it differently. We want to set up different kind of notifications. So that's why we use different apps for those purposes. I think it's the same thing here. So in order to really execute your strategy, you need to build experiences that are relevant to each of your stakeholders and in every touch point of the process. In order to get a greater level of adoption of the programs that you are running. I imagine, Mike, that getting buy-in from all of your key stakeholders was probably a must, but given the complexity of Siemens, and we saw a little bit of that before, I think this was probably a big challenge, right?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the things that has been the biggest challenge, again, it's an opportunity for us, but it's also a challenge, is the size and scale of the company. So again, as Augustine mentioned, one of the things that we've tried to do here is just be as simple and straightforward as possible. It's been my experience that everybody knows what to do, but sometimes people just don't do it. Right, so you say the things that are important, and then you proceed to ignore them. So one of the things that we've done is try to really execute effectively across these things. So we really want a tight alignment with all stakeholders, and for us, that's a lot of people. That's a central IT team. That's some central legal, data privacy, information security people. It's country data privacy, information security people, because that changes country by country. It's it's the regional speakers on the talent acquisition side. It's the recruiters themselves. It's the shared services function that may support them behind the scenes. We have to think of hiring managers. We have to think of candidates, and we have to think of anybody else that's sort of involved in the delivery and ongoing maintenance of any technology that we run here. So we really worked hard on alignment with stakeholders as a core theme. And then the other thing that we did, it sounds silly, but we treat this religiously. Every week, Tuesday at 8:30 Eastern Time, we have a call with everybody on the global project team. Every week, without fail. And we talk about all the things that happened the prior week and what needs to happen the following week. It's typically just a half hour, but it's been invaluable for us, and it's something that we highly recommend. We spent a lot of time at the beginning of the project defining roles and responsibilities. It's easy to say, oh, let's just put a project team together. It's harder when you're halfway into this, and then you realize that you don't really know who's authorized to make a decision. So we spent a lot of time at the beginning defining who did what on the team, who could decide, who was responsible for doing what, how roles interacted with one another. And honestly, without doing that, we would not have been half as successful as we've been. We wanted to make sure that we had the right people and expert input. So for us, that meant that we, in many cases, ignored hierarchy. Which again, for a large global traditional kind of a company is a cultural change we're undergoing, and it feels a little scary at times, but it's been a real positive step for us. It doesn't matter where you are in the organization. If you are the right person to weigh in on a specific topic, then you are on the project team. And if that means that we need you to fly to Shanghai with the rest of the team to figure out what to do in China, that means that you're going on that trip. So it's created tremendous opportunities for people many of whom are sort of early in their careers. We had this open and constant communication in a global company. Many of you can, I'm sure, appreciate this. Open and constant communication is another way of saying that you're never quite sure whether you're going to be on a call at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., but we're really committed at the beginning to staying connected to one another through any means that we had. So we text, we do live meeting, we send emails, we call each other on the telephone. It's just sort of a constant conversation traveling around the world. And then as we go country by country with rollout, we've got checklists that we give to the country so that they don't have to figure this out on their own. We give it to them, and then we help them make sure that they're doing what needs to be done to enable various functionality within Avature in their country. And we took this wave approach, which we try to do with everything. It's hard to do everything at once here, so we sort of roll waves through sort of based on size of country. So we typically have about 8 to 10 countries that are the large ones, the usual suspects: Germany, U.S., China, India, Brazil, Middle East, and then we go to the smaller, medium countries and roll from there. And this has been helpful because then everybody can cascade their knowledge down and create critical mass at the top. And then by the time we get to the smaller countries, there's a lot of people in the world that understand what to do and a lot of help for the medium and small countries. So a specific example of something that we've done is Avature has helped us sort of on the employer referral side. So this is a perfect indication of what happens when you don't run talent acquisition as a unified global function. So some countries did not have an employer referral program. Some countries did. We operate on 2 separate applicant tracking systems worldwide. So what we had was, we do business in about 190 countries. We had 19 employer referral programs, many countries with none, but they all ran separate. So if somebody referred a friend to a job in the UK, it was probably not visible to anybody but that recruiter in the UK. What we have now done with Avature is that we have feeds from both of our applicant tracking systems into a single global portal for our employer referral program. So now we have one program, not 19. Many countries that did not have a program now do. We're enabling cross-country referrals because many of our businesses want to hire people that have experience, and we've got big sort of project management roles that we fill. And frequently these are people that work on a project for 3 to 5 years in one part of the world and then move to another part of the world to run a similar project. So while many recruiting activities are local, for us, many of our roles benefit from a global referral and global talent pool. And now we're able to sort of have all the recruiters worldwide tap into a single entity, that being Avature, and all employees worldwide now are working off of one unified employer referral program by Avature, which is it still, brings a tear to my eye because this is just a massive effort over many, many people for many, many months. And it's just astounding that we're now at a point where any recruiter in the world can look in the same system and any employee in the world sees the same interface. So it's easy to talk about doing things globally. It's very hard to pull them off when you're as big and complicated as we are. So this is a very big success for us, and would not have been possible without our friends at Avature.
Yeah, and I think that if we're able to take a closer look at the referrals portal, I think this is also a great example of service delivery. We're building what Siemens has done is build this interface for referrers to access and to very seamlessly, very easily be able to submit referrals and to not just send a referral, but also keep track of the ones that they have done in the past. So again, it's about building experiences that are relevant for the stakeholders. So moving on to the last of our pillars today, let's go to engagement now. So as I mentioned earlier, Avature started as a CRM, as a recruiting CRM, because our CEO, Dmitry Buyin, noticed that the technology that was available for recruiting at the time was mostly about tracking and staying compliant. But what was lacking, sales and marketing tools to attract passive talent. And as we've seen today, it's very important to engage this passive talent in this very competitive market that we're in today. So a technology that drives innovation is not a system of records. It is, in our opinion, it is an engagement system, a tool that you can use to build relationships with candidates, but also that allows you to foster collaboration within the talent acquisition organization. And this can be done by enabling real-time and targeted communication. And we have very interesting examples of customers that are doing very sophisticated things related to candidate engagement. For example, as opposed to just sending a thank you message after leads registered to the talent community, they're actually using the information that they collected within that landing page, for example, to target very, very specific short, mid, and long-term email campaigns, such as, newsletters, job alerts, for example. So it's all about getting the information that you collected, delivering relevant content to engage with that audience. But as I mentioned before, it's not just about engaging your candidates, but you also need to engage your own team, right, Mike?
Yes, and this is the last piece we wanted to really talk about on the engagement side from a Siemens perspective. So, again, one of the things that we're trying to focus on is, how can we simplify the message about what we're trying to accomplish in a way that's consumable by HR leadership, TA leadership, and by the recruiters themselves. Again, as I said earlier, for us, we've all seen technological enhancements or new systems launches that have gone horribly wrong because they're run too much out of headquarters, and people assume that they know what the recruiters in the world are doing, and they don't really, and then the tools get launched and then sit on somebody's desk. So we're taking a decidedly different approach here and trying to really put in everything that we do the recruiter at the center. So we recognize that job seeker behavior is changing, and we think that's critical and accelerating, and that requires changes on behalf of how corporate TA functions run, and it will require change in how recruiters think about their jobs and what they do. And recruiters are notorious for wanting to be left alone because I've got my system, don't tell me what to do, don't bother me with all this other stuff. And what we're trying to do is slowly bring recruiters along on this journey to say, but can't you see that it's changing? Posting jobs and skimming through the resumes to find the right one no longer works for many of the jobs that we have. You've got to go out into the marketplace and find those people. And once you find them, you may not have a job today. You need to engage with them and have a tool to do that. And traditional ATS systems are not set up for that. Avature is. So we also believe recruiters have to change how they run their desks. And we also fundamentally believe that teams of recruiters worldwide need to be able to work collaboratively. So one way that we're driving this engagement is, as I said earlier, is traveling the world and running these workshops. We've We don't know whether we have trademark protection yet on this. We're trying for this, but we've got something that we call the A Cubed, which is basically an Avature adoption accelerator. Recruiting is hard. It's not an easy job anywhere, but I think that inside corporations, TA functions tend not to be understood completely. And part of my mission in life is to get people to understand that these jobs are very hard to do, and that we have to have as much support for these folks as we can and have as much fun as possible. So what we've done, which is pretty fun, is that we've run just to get people to understand how to use the tool and how it might impact their day-to-day life. We've done some scavenger hunts. So we ran one in the last workshop we did in Abu Dhabi, and we divided the team there into two groups. And then we had them supported by two virtual coaches, so two folks from our team in the U.S. dialed in very early in the morning to help coach their colleagues in Abu Dhabi on how to use the tool. We made up some silly things that they needed to do to win points, and then we gave prizes out at the end. It's never ceases to amaze me how competitive recruiters will get. So we had a lot of fun with this, and at the end, people were able to sit back and reflect on the fact that in addition to having a good time and connecting with their colleagues in other parts of the world, that they started to really understand how this tool of Avature, in combination with a mindset change and behavior change by them, that they could transform how we do TA at Siemens, that they needed to. The tool helps, but if you don't think of yourself as a global member of a team, then you're going to limit the ability of Avature to transform us. And if you don't think of yourself as needing to change how you approach your work, then technology is only going to take you so far. We feel like mindset, behavior, and technology combined, if you change all three, that's how true transformation takes place. And we're very excited that we've got some projects that came out of this workshop where we've got teams across Germany, UK, US, and UAE working together to pipeline candidates for some very specific roles that we require. And we think in the next month or so, we should have our first hires from this pool of talent that were sourced globally. That never would have happened in the past. And again, it shows that people's mindset changed, their actual behavior changed, and the technology to enable all that, was supplied by Avature. So it's, I guess the last slide, Augustine, I'll just hit on a couple of points too. We've linked Avature broadly to our strategy to get leadership buy-in. Like most companies, money doesn't grow on trees here. We had to battle other, demands and requests for money, but we worked hard to convince our senior leadership who made this investment that without this, we would have a very difficult time transforming our TA function, that we wanted to keep these channels of communication open, and there's so many now, they all need to stay open, and that we wanted to have this agile project structure with the right people. We've got a core team, but we add and subtract to that as needed as we go forward. We've got an internal social network that we use to stay connected to one another, which has really helped us spread the word quickly. So now we've got lots of Avature devotees around the world. And again, for us, last but not least, is that we never want to forget that the end user for us is the recruiter. Certainly, candidates and hiring managers are important stakeholders, but for us, we felt like if we could really get recruiter mindset and behavior to change using this technology, that the rest would flow from there. So with that, I'll turn it back to Augustine and let him wrap up.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So I think we're kind of running out of time, so we're going to be brief. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and hopefully you were able to get out of this 45 minutes webinar some hints on how to bring your strategic TA vision to life based on having, an agile, provide service delivery and engagement, both, in your talent acquisition organization, but also to leverage technology that also supports these pillars. So I'm going to hand it over back to Randy with that.
Sounds good. Augustine and Mike, thank you so much for being here to share your expertise, and Mike, of course, for sharing the Siemens story. Great takeaways there. We have had some questions come in over the course of the webcast, so we do want to get to as many of those as we can in the time we have left. HCI members, if you haven't yet submitted any questions, please do so now. You can enter those right there on the webcast page in that Q&A box, and we will queue those up for our presenters. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first question here. And Mike, I think I'll direct this first question to you, and then we'll see if Augustine has anything to add. This first question asks, what has been the largest learning experience for you, given the breadth of this project?
I think the biggest learning for us, and it just reinforces what we said from the beginning, that the biggest learning for us is that we feel like sustained success can only be gained if you get the recruiters on board and you get that mindset and that behavior to change at the local level, which is facilitated and enabled by the technology. We've learned from past mistakes, both here and other places, I think all of us, that if you just roll out a technology and don't talk to people about process change and behavior change and bring them along without sort of lecturing them, allowing people to get there on their own and helping facilitate those conversations quite bluntly in person quite often, that we didn't feel like this success would be sustained. We're seeing rapid uptake of the tool, rapid uptake of this new way of thinking. And we're absolutely convinced that it's because we're not sending memos from headquarters. We're on planes. We're sitting in rooms with recruiters around the world, for days at a time to try to talk about this, because it's an important thing for us. And to assume that you can do this electronically only, I think is a bad assumption. And we've really learned quickly that decision by us, which is, time consuming and a bit exhausting, it is actually the only way for us to feel confident that we can get sustained change.
Augustine, any thoughts there?
No, I think that the point that Mike did was very interesting. So actually, taking action and not just writing a memo and waiting for things to actually happen, but really going out there and see what things people are suffering, what they need, and after that, execute the strategy. I think that's one of the greatest points.
Great. And this next question from the audience, I think we'll redirect back to Mike as well and the Siemens experience. The next question is, how has the employee referral hiring success rate improved with these changes?
It's still a little early because many of the countries have just gone live, but we've seen in the countries that actually had an existing employer referral program, we've seen a probably, I would, and this is some of this is just based on extrapolation of some of the data that we pulled in already, but we've seen probably, a 20 to 25% increase in referrals themselves. We've got in countries that already had referral programs. And certainly the big success for us in countries that did not is that now they actually have referrals in an effective and efficient way. And I think the best example for us on why this is good is that we've got some large-scale project work underway in certain countries, the UK as an example, that has that had a good program to begin with, but has now gone to the new model and has seen, I think, a pretty significant increase not only in the number of referrals, but also the number of hires through that channel. And the other benefit, I think it's still too soon to call this, is that there will be people now in our Avature database globally that are referred through all of these different countries who may at some point in time get hired into another country. And that opportunity we never would have had before. So it's a little bit early to go with all the data and metrics, but we've seen volume increases in countries with existing programs. We've seen obviously growth in those countries that did not have a program prior. Some pick up in hiring through this channel in certain countries, and a hope that we'll get some cross-country hires over the next several months.
Great. Any further thoughts there from you, Augustine?
No, I'm feeling nothing to add there.
All right, great. The next question we have, regarding this new technology, what are recruiters most excited about?
I think the thing they're most excited about is I think many recruiters have come to the realization that their jobs have changed and that it's no longer, an ATS-centric world where you post the jobs and then you screen through the resumes and then you move people through the various folders. It's a more dynamic and interactive job than it used to be. And if you're really doing this job the right way, we believe that you need to be more proactive in your outreach and that you need to become less like a processor of applications and more of an internal headhunter, for lack of a better word, and to have a tool that enables that in Avature, that where people get comfortable working with Avature and with their ATS. That was one of our challenges at the beginning. People felt like we were throwing another tool on top of them, and our approach was, the applicant tracking system still functions for many needed reasons, but you need to sort of add Avature at the front end to think differently about how you get candidates. And if you build these talent pools proactively, then when a job becomes available, you can send a note out to your talent pool, have people apply, and in theory, you should be able to fill those jobs a lot faster because you already have nurtured an applicant pool. You're not posting and praying. So I think the light bulb goes on with experienced recruiters who realize that this is a tool that enables them to actually behave and function differently than they did before, which makes them feel like they're a more, technologically advanced and digitally transforming recruiter. Makes them feel like they're keeping pace with the changes in the field.
Great final thought there, Mike. Appreciate that. I do want to say one more thank you to our presenters today, Augustine Donati of Avature and Mike Brown of Siemens. And I also want to thank everyone at Avature for making this webcast possible. Of course, the biggest thank you of all goes out to all of our HCI members. We appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon to spend with us and look forward to seeing all of you on another webcast soon. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.